Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of RPG Radio. On today's episode we're going to be playing a different build in Grimdawn, and there are a couple different reasons for that. But the most important one is because my last build was getting super tedious and none of the gear that I wanted is dropping on that class, making it easy to grind. So I've switched it up to my pet build today, and I've been focusing on trying to push this one up to ultimate, making the pets work, making the class what I want it to be. So we're in elite right now, we're at about level 80. Things are going good in Ugnenbog, and I've got plenty of stuff I can share with you about this build so that you can play it yourself if you want to, or iterate on it on your own time. But let me just say before we talk about anything, the resists on this build currently are trash. If you're in the Grim tools, they're going to be pretty bad, so don't look too hard at them. The elemental resist, the pierce resistor are junk, and the stun reduction is junk as well. But you know, everything else pretty decent, at least in elite. So let's talk about some skills. Because this is a pet build, there are going to be a lot of skills, but a lot of them are going to be passively focused, with only a couple buttons that we actually need to push to influence any sort of damage when it comes to this build. So I'm just going to go all down the hotbar here, and you can figure it out as we go. First one is our movement ability. This is Soul Strike. Soul Strike is a glyph that you'll pick up from the blacksmith. The reason that we've taken this is because of the vitality damage, the vitality decay, and the stun, and not to mention the small amount of health that we're going to get back when using this ability on its relatively low cooldown. Now, this one does require a target, so you have to click on something to make it happen, but the good news is we're pretty offensive oriented with this build, and our pets do a lot of the aggro reduction for us. So things get pretty easy as long as you're staying survivable, and there is a lot of other stuff going on in this kit keeping us survivable. Which brings me to skill number 2, the Wendigo Totem. We're also picking up the Wendigo Totem modifier Blood Pact, but Wendigo Totem, when you drop it down, it works the same way as basically a stationary pet. It's got its own abilities, and it does its own damage. It deals vitality and vitality decay as well, but Mend Wounds is one of its other abilities, and that is going to restore 300 health and 3% of your max health in a 0.5 second time frame while it is alive. So it heals in a big AoE, and you can drop this right down on yourself, you can drop it right down on your pets, and it will give a just massive AoE heal almost constantly when it comes to the amount of time this thing can stay up. So, all that being said, we also have a Bone Scythe, which is a monster infrequent from some of the cave-dwelling creatures in the game. And what that's doing is reducing the cooldown on Wendigo Totem by 4 seconds and removing its energy cost completely. So that basically means we can spam as many of the Wendigo Totems as we want to, but bear in mind that it does have a 1 second limit, or a 1 summon limit. You're going to put one down, and then when you put the next one down, it's going to change spaces basically. So there you have it. It basically means that you can move it if you placed it in the wrong spot, but typically the way that I'm playing this build is dash in, drop totem, and then hit Bone Harvest, and then our pets are usually crowded up around us anyway because we're melee, so it's not very hard to put this in the right spot. The next skill on the line is going to be Conjure Primal Spirit, coming from the Shaman side of things. Nahani is my, this is my Ritualist. The Ritualist is a Shaman and a Necromancer, and it is fantastic at summoning and doing lots of good stuff for pets. But the second Shaman pet that we're going to take, I guess it's the first, but it's the second in importance. But Conjure Primal Spirit is going to conjure a Manticore for us. It's not invincible and it doesn't last forever, but it's going to deal some decent damage. It also gets a fair amount of time to live, which is 20 seconds. It's not the worst thing in the world, and it looks pretty cool, but really I don't love that this is just kind of the worst of both worlds in that it can be killed and it's on a timer. There are a bunch of summons out there that last forever and don't have they don't die, or they're invincible. Sorry, my God. Blade Spirits and the Oathkeeper's Guardians come to mind, and those both deal decent damage, but I don't know. Primal Spirit, I want to make it work. I want to have it on this build because I do like it. It does stun enemies that it has with one of its abilities, but the cooldown on it is relatively long, and the summon itself is a little bit lackluster. So really, I'm just using it because it's part of the build. I want to have as many pets on the screen as possible, so we're sticking with it. But if you're adverse to this ability for whatever reason, you can take it off the build. It's not super important for the way that things work. Now the next one is going to be Bone Harvest. Super useful ability for one particular reason, and it's not the one that you're thinking probably. We don't use Bone Harvest to deal damage, even though it's dealing cold and vitality along with piercing damage. That's good, but more importantly, the modifier at the end called Soul Harvest is more important. Soul Harvest is going to provide some cold and vitality damage to the base skill itself, but is going to affect your pets by giving them a vitality damage of the flat variety and increasing all of their damage, period. So basically, you're going to fire off your Bone Harvest, and it has got a 5-second duration in which it will give your pets cold and vitality damage. And that'll basically have your Bone Harvest ready to fire off again, because it's only a 3-second skill recharge as is. So as often as you use this ability, you will keep your pets buffed up, and it is not hard to push this button. Mainly because it's big, it's AoE, it's damage, you're going to throw it at enemies anyway, so your pets are going to be dealing more damage with it. You'll also want to take Dread, because Dread increases the range of your Bone Harvest, but apart from that, it's just increasing vitality, decay. More importantly, the best part I think about this particular mastery is with a couple points, you have a chance to confuse targets for 2 seconds. And confusion is basically a stun on an enemy that they are still allowed to walk around. So if you ever see an enemy just kind of like turn around and amble into a wall, that's confusion. They're not attacking you, they're not attacking anybody else, they're just confused, which is really good. It is a really good status effect to have for clearing out mobs of enemies, and since you're using, again, Soul Harvest so often, there's really no reason not to take it. But after that, we have an item active ability right now. It's called Call of the Beast. That is a 20-second cooldown for a 12-second duration in which you are getting 100% to all of your damage, 15% to your attack speed, and your pets are getting the exact same, which is pretty wicked helpful, all things considered. But again, it's gear focused, and you're going to get that from the helmet of the set that we're currently rocking. If you don't have this, it's not the end of the world. It is a pretty big damage buff, but you can find the blueprint for the Beast Caller's cowl, which is the helmet, which will give you this particular skill. Now, that being said, the rest of the Beast Caller set is pretty great. I've got 2 other pieces between the shoulder pads and the talisman, but we don't have the shroud quite yet to get the final piece of the puzzle. Regardless, though, Beast Callers does deal in very good stats for the Shaman and the Necromancer, so No, it's Shaman and Occultist. Anyway, the Shaman parts of the set are very good. The Occultist parts are kind of wasted, but it's not the worst thing in the world. I think it's still worth it. But yeah, so after the Call of the Beast active, we have Call of the Grave, which is the Necromancer active, and basically the same thing as Call of the Beast, just works even better. So it's on a 24-second skill recharge with a 10-second duration, longer cooldown, shorter duration, but it's giving your character crit damage, acid, which isn't important, the vitality and the vitality decay go up by over 100%, and it is going to also give your pets 222% to all of their damage, along with 28% crit damage. So when they crit, they're going to crit even harder, and this is going to help them do that. We also have an item modifier for this in our Deathwatcher pendant, which is going to increase the duration of Call of the Grave, which is fantastic. You know, the longer you have it, the better. And then it is also going to give them a 15% health restoration anytime that we hit the button. So that, in and of itself, just having a heal button with this class is really, really fantastic. Call of the Grave and the Deathwatcher pendant, they go incredibly well together. Since it's a pet-focused build, there's no reason not to do it. You can also buy the Deathwatcher pendant from the secret shop out in the Blood Grove, so you don't have to go hunting down every avenue for this thing. You can just go purchase it as long as you have enough money and make things work. It's really, really handy. But after Call of the Grave, we have Raised Skeletons, which is, with all intents and purposes, probably the bigger damage dealing pet button in this build. Raised Skeletons does need a lot of points to be good, and the skeletons themselves do need some direction because they do like to stand in damage and they aren't as healthy as our other summons in this build. That being said, when you get over 20 points in Raised Skeletons, your skeletons are going to come out more often mages and the skeletal warriors. They're the tanky versions. They're the big boys. The guys can actually take a hit. The mages are going to be dealing ranged damage, obviously, with different spells. But your main form of skeletal warrior that will still come out, the one that has the highest percentage to come out, are archers. And archers dealing ranged damage means that they don't go running into certain death puddles from big bosses or big bad unique enemies, which helps them stay alive. So do as many points as you can, get the damage as high as you can. They're very, very good, and they do work very well with your other pets because we're going to be taking some big tanky boys for the front line. As far as the modifiers go, make sure that you get Undead Legion all the way to level 12. You don't have to do any further than that, but Undead Legion is going to increase the summon limit for your skeletons, so you can have a grand total of 8, I think it is, rather than just 3, which is how the skill starts out. And then from there, you'll also want to take Will of the Crypt, because that's giving them more flat vitality damage, buffing their vitality damage and elemental damage, giving them a bunch of vitality resistance, and increasing their armor. Everything in the skeleton tree you're going to want to have because you're a necromancer. Not only does it fit the theme, but the skeletons are incredibly good at dealing damage with a little bit of nuance movement with them. When you're playing this build, I incredibly highly recommend having your pet attack on your right click so you can tell your pets exactly where to go, exactly when you need to have it. Now, they all go at once, they all go in a big clump, which is a little bit, could be worse, could be better, but it's easier to have them all move as one group because you want to get them all out of things like Aether Fire puddles or, those big chaos vitality damage puddles, stuff that's just going to sit on the ground and deal damage to them, and they're too stupid to dodge it because they're AI, and that's just where we are. So, all that being said, skeletons are big buddies. Keep them hanging around. They're totally worth it. Savagery is your next ability. We only have 1 point into Savagery, and it's not necessarily because it's the greatest thing in the world, but it does help us activate some devotions, which are pretty important for keeping our pets alive. So we'll get to those. We may not get to it in this video, but I'll give you the devotions in the next video at the very least, if I don't make it this time. But yeah, just remember, Savagery, you're going to want that to have, because you need it for your, you need it to activate one of your devotions. As far as other abilities go, there are 2 more summons in this kit. The first being the Briarthorn. Get this bad boy up to at least 10 to 12 points, I think, because you're going to want him to be very healthy. You're going to be able to want him to hang around with other enemies in Elite and Ultimate, and he needs a bunch of life to do that. But other than that, he's going to be helping with, or he's going to be doing more crit damage. He's going to be buffing damage. He's going to increase his own health percentage, along with scaling his flat health. And he does have a passive to help everybody out along the way called Emboldening Presence. That's going to give physical and bleeding resistance to everybody in the AoE of the passive, as well as retaliation damage. He also buffs everybody's damage, not by a whole lot, but he's giving you buffs to all damage and offensive ability. The more points you put into Emboldening Presence, the better it gets. Obviously, I don't have to explain that to anybody, but it is incredibly good for pet builds because it does work in an AoE and it affects your character as well. You can also take Ground Slam. It does make him more tanky, more, he takes more aggro, but I also don't know if this is entirely necessary considering. So I threw a point in it just to have it because I like that the Briarthorn can do what it's doing and have something more to do, but live your life. It's your pet build, right? Unless you're copying me verbatim and then take it. Next up on the Shaman tree, last on the Shaman tree actually, is going to be Mogdrogan's Pact. Get this about halfway, get it up to 7, so you can get the health regen, the energy regen, and the physical damage. And then you're also going to pick up points in Heart of the Wild and Oak Skin. Both of these are still giving passive stats. Heart of the Wild is giving you a percentage health bonus, as well as a bleeding and poison reduction, which aren't too big a deal, but that health is really important when you want to be tanky. Oak Skin also pretty good because this is giving you pierce resistance and aether resistance, things that you may have noticed with our kind of horrible resistances in this build are going to be pretty useful. You're also getting flat armor, but I don't know if that's necessarily important. I'm mainly taking it for the sake of the resistances. Now, in the Necromancer tree, the big boy summon that we've got on that side, I'm sure you figured it out by now. He's been just splurting and gurting all over this video already. It's the Blight Fiend. Blight Fiend is a poison-focused, big, tanky guy on the Necromancer tree, and you're going to want to take Rotting Fumes as well as Blight Burst with him. Blight Burst has a chance to confuse the targets. No, it's not even a chance. It's just going to confuse the targets that it hits as long as they don't have a resistance to that type of effect. And Rotting Fumes is going to do the same thing that Ground Slam does for the Briarthorn, except this one is going to reduce the target's defensive ability, give them a chance to fumble or blind them as well. So Rotting Fumes and Ground Slam fill the same kind of pet ability slots, but they do different things. After that, though, you've got one more passive on the Necromancer side of things called Master of Death. This is going to be giving all of your pets 42% to all of their damage, as well as vitality damage, and converting 46% of their physical damage into vitality damage as well. You're dropping offensive ability on a 10% scale and giving them a 20% vitality resistance too. Your character is getting percent offensive ability, flat defensive ability, and vitality resistance, but mainly this is going to buff your pets astronomically. It is incredibly good, and since your pets are going to be dealing mainly vitality damage as this build goes through its paces, that's what you want to have. So, all that being said, these are all these skills are very, very static. I used these in the last time I played this build, and I haven't really seen a need to change much up. But regardless, the playstyle is pretty simple: keeping your pets alive, keeping yourself alive so that your pets can deal damage, and making sure that everybody is getting healed as much as possible. There is going to be another video for this build because ultimately I need to get it to level 94 to use the set that I really want to stick to it. But at least for the people who want that quick and dirty devotion path in this video, you'll get 1 point into your pink crossroads. You'll get Tsunami, Viper, Lizard, Lion. You'll also pick up Dryad, Hound, Panther, then your Staff of Ritosh, your Ulo, Keeper of the Waters, followed by a Tree of Life, and Ishtak, the Spear Maiden. There's a bunch of explanation that goes into why those are good, but there's not enough time left in this video to go into it. With the remaining 4 points that we have in the devotion tree, we're going to go for the Scales of Olkama, and we're going to go towards the right side of the scales to get the ability for Tip the Scales, which will give you a 33% chance when hit to get some decent buffs. But like I said, we'll hit that in the next video, since this one was all about skills. And that is going to be it. The Diablo 4 beta is coming back online this weekend, so that is where I will be spending my time, split among some other things. But for the time being, thanks so much for hanging out. Let me know what you thought of the build in the comments below. And apart from that, I will see you all next time. Peace out.